Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. I am thrilled to bring you a conversation today that I found really grounding, really rich, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So this conversation is with Jodi Wilson, who is a bestselling author, a health journalist. She's a postpartum doula. She's a mother of 4, and you really get the sense, I really got the sense, at least through our chat, that she practices what she preaches. So she has got a new book out called A Brain That Breathes: Essential Habits for an Overwhelming World. And I have been feeling pretty flustered this week. I went into this conversation pretty heightened, and I came out of it feeling so much calmer and so much more grounded. So I am excited to share this conversation with you. We talked about, really creating that space to breathe, and decluttering your brain. And she talks in a way that is really relevant and inclusive and non-judgmental, and not prescriptive at all. And so I think you'll get lots of really practical tips and insights and reminders of things that we can do to just slow down a little bit and give our brain that breathing space that it really sort of craves. I know so many parents' brains need that breathing space, but it can feel impossible when we're in the thick of motherhood. And I talked a little bit about, I shared a little bit about where I'm at on my life stage and my life season with Jodi as well. And so we talked about some things that are helpful if you're in the earlier stages of motherhood, but also some things that will be really helpful if you're, at a stage that's similar to me and your kids are sort of older and you do have that extra space and time that you crave so much when your kids are smaller. So I love this conversation. I would highly recommend you grab a copy of her book, A Brain That Breathes. It is available at anywhere you buy books. And let's get stuck into this conversation. Hello, Jodi. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
I'm so excited to chat to you today. And I think this conversation is going to be so helpful for our listeners, but I think also for me as well. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
So I'm the best-selling author of 4 books, including my latest release, which is called A Brain That Breathes. I'm a health journalist, a postpartum doula, a yoga teacher, and a mother of 4.
Wow, 4 books. That is impressive. And being a mum of 4. That's amazing. I've wanted to write a book for a long time, but I haven't even started one yet. So maybe I'll be inspired after this conversation. So your newest book is A Brain That Breathes, which just sounds like so much of what us parents could do with. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, all books start with a question. And at the end of my 3rd book, which was a real deep dive into postpartum, which is such a complex topic to be writing about, especially knowing that my reader was going to be likely sleep deprived and also the most psychologically vulnerable and physiologically vulnerable stage of their life. So I was very wary that I needed to do the research, explain it simply, and not put judgment on the page, which is a massive responsibility. But I ended that book really quite worn out, and I felt like I was backpedaling from burnout. And I started to think, it was quite a self-indulgent thought, like, what do I need to continue coming up with bright ideas and writing books and not feel absolutely exhausted by the end of it? And during that research for postpartum, it was also very clear to me that what our babies and our young children need from us biologically, so their biological demands, don't fit very well with our normal everyday reality. There's a really severe disconnect there. And I did wonder whether the overwhelm that so many of us are talking about, quite flippantly, really, that's how we describe and define normal life, is a result of that similar disconnect. And it didn't take much research for me to realize that there really is a severe disconnect between the life our brain was designed for and our normal everyday reality. And that disconnect is informing exhaustion, mental illness, decision fatigue, overwhelm, and an epidemic of burnout, which is affecting us in our workplaces, but there is also recorded evidence of parental burnout in 48 countries around the world now. So it's very pertinent. And the next step for me was to figure out what the remedy was. And it didn't take, again, much time to realize that modern life has effectively eradicated breathing space. So in all of the moments, 10,000 years ago where we would have been pottering and pondering, and, even not that long ago, say in the early 2000s, there was a lot of spare time between all of the doing. And we don't have that anymore because we have phones, but also because we're living in late stage capitalism where our success is measured on our achievement. And we keep going and going, and we have to keep going and going because the cost of living keeps going up. And housing crisis means that for many of us, housing is unstable, I should say, and the stress of that. And so I really kind of started to look at what breathing space was. And I define it as small moments of downtime often. It's accessible, it's actionable, it's free. You don't need to go out to do something or buy something. And I really started to action it as I was doing the research and writing the book. And it's made a significant difference to my life. So I'm a naturally anxious person. I easily get overwhelmed. But these small things I do each day have become a real anchor for me. And I'm a much more stable, grounded person now.
That's just beautiful. And I think you've just, explained that so well, explained how so many mums feel, and I think that, I guess getting that breathing space feels impossible for so many mums, because there's so much to do. And I say mums, I think with dads as well. I know most of our listeners are mums, but I do not want to leave the dads out because I think it's, a similar sort of scenario for them. So can you give our listeners maybe some examples of what breathing space could look like in the life of a busy parent? I mean, that's you. You've got 4 children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my kids are aged 8 to 18, so they're definitely out of that young child phase. But the older children come with their own challenges. They're just different challenges. My washing basket is always full. There's always dishes in the sink. I spend so much time, in every single day sorting odd socks. So I'm very much still in the parenting trenches. But with this book, what I didn't want to do was add more to people's lives because we've already got enough. So I've really focused on subtraction. So what can you actually take away to make space? And that can feel quite confronting at first, but I've ended each chapter with a 5 ways to. And my encouragement is just to do one thing today and think of only today. So I don't want you even to think about tomorrow because that's too much for many of us. Yeah. So if we just focus on today, and really that's all we know today. So what can you do today to create a bit of space and really rest in that space? And so for me, subtraction looks like taking out my headphones when I walk, with which podcast interviewers hate it when I talk about this, because of course you want your podcast being listened to. But I found that I was using every opportunity to fill my brain with more stuff. And now when I walk without headphones. I've been doing this for about 18 months now. It's a beautiful break in my day. I also don't take my phone into the bedroom ever. So it's plugged into the kitchen at night. And that separation is so helpful for me, that space. But also the moment today that you start to feel tired, instead of pushing through, I want you to take 3 deep inhalations and let out 3 really loud releasing sighs. So sighing is the body's stress release mechanism, and the brain actually dictates a sigh through what's known as the breathing pacemaker, which exists in the brain, when the body is holding too much tension. So sighing is so powerful for us, and it's a really good reset. Another thing you can do, which is one of my favorite things to do, is lie with your legs up the wall. And you can do that when the kids are watching TV, or like when they're just playing on or around you. And sometimes we do have to be a little bit flexible, especially in those early parenting years when there is very little physical space between us and our babies. Lie with your legs up the wall, close your eyes, and just let your body grow heavy with every exhalation. You only have to stay there for 5 minutes. And you might be thinking, I don't have 5 minutes, but you absolutely do have 5 minutes, because I bet you spend much more than that on your phone every day. And I don't want to talk about phones and make you feel guilty, because we all do it. And phones are designed to very cleverly addict us. They're based on neuroscience. Those engineers know our brain really well. But for your nervous system and your brain, a really intentional break from the screen is so beneficial.
Yes, I love that. And I'm guilty of walking with my headphones in. I'm often like, I have a Voxer chat with some friends and we sort of send each other messages, or I'm listening to a podcast. And if I'm wanting to be in a more relaxed zone, I'll listen to not a business podcast or not a learning podcast, just more of a chatty podcast. But it's just all this input all the time. And I've really tried to start going for more walks without my phone. So that's inspired me to do that more. I mean, just that blanket rule of just don't take your phone when you're going for a walk. And it's such a different experience. I live along this beautiful scrub, and the other day I went for a walk, just a slow walk with my dog, just to get her out. And I just, I was letting her sniff. So I was just taking it at that slower pace as well, without headphones in. And there's a tree, a huge gum tree just down from where I live. I've never really fully noticed it before. But this walk that I took without my headphones in, I just stood and looked at this tree and all the birds and noticed all of the details of this tree. And I've walked past that tree hundreds of times, and I wouldn't have even, if someone said, that big gum tree just down the scrub, I would have said, no, I don't know which one you're talking about. So,
you know what that practice is called? It's got a name.
No, tell me.
It's called soft fascination. So it's one of the most charming concepts I came across in my research. And when we're on a screen, our awareness enters hard activation mode. So it's a bit like sirens in the street, like you can't look away. Soft fascination is also known as mindfulness without meditation. And it happens when we are, just like you were, standing under a big tree or standing in a green space or walking through a city park. And our awareness is lightly captivated. So our gaze moves from the sky to the cloud, to the tree, to the leaves on the tree, to the branches that are moving in the wind, to the patterns on the bark. And as that's happening, our brain kind of takes a bit of a backseat and does the really good work of decluttering. So no one's really talking about decluttering the brain, but it's a bit like the kitchen bench in that it's a magnet for clutter. And we have what's known as a scarcity mindset. So the brain thinks, I better get this now because it might not be there later. It applies to food, it applies to belongings, and it also applies to information. And our phones make that really easy. So there's a new term I've seen floating around just, a little bit called infobesity, which alludes to the fact that we're actually gorging on information and entertainment. And our brain is filling, 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 filling. And we're not doing the necessary work of decluttering because, as I said at the beginning, it happens in all those moments, all those mellow states where we're kind of pottering and pondering, walking without headphones, standing on the footpath looking up at a tree, all of those things that we don't do because we are so busy and distracted.
Gosh, yes, I love that. And, it's just, I think I'm not alone with, having the headphones in when I'm cooking or, having something playing or a podcast playing even when I'm driving. So yeah, I just feel the benefits of not
Mm.
doing that. But there's something that always brings me back to pressing play again. So this is just a really good reminder. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the differentiation that you make between self-care and real rest. I really resonate with this as well because I go to yoga on a Friday morning. We do a lot of sighing in yoga. It's a slow yoga class. I look forward to it. It's a beautiful way to end my week, but I'm often rushing to my yoga class.
Mm.
And I think that's a good example of, us thinking that we're doing self-care, but we're not, getting that real rest. So, yeah, I guess can you talk to us a bit about that and how parents can move from being focused on self-care, which I think we're more and more aware of now, but shifting to that real rest.
I actually really dislike the term self-care. So it's got really meaningful roots in Black feminist activism. So Audre Lorde in the late 1980s coined the term self-care because she knew she had to look after herself so she could go out and advocate for change. But now self-care has just been swept up in a capitalist rhetoric. Do this and buy this and you'll be better. And it's a multi-trillion-dollar global industry. So no one is making any money when you choose to rest and do less. And that's precisely why all of the self-care rhetoric is focused on going to the yoga class, buying the new face cleanser, getting the massage. But for new parents, when they're feeling really vulnerable and exhausted and frustrated and overwhelmed, the number one tip is prioritize self-care. And so their thought process goes, I really need to prioritize self-care. That means I need to choose my self-care of choice. I need to book it in. I need to work to pay for it, or I need to find some money in the budget to pay for it. I've got to organize for someone to look after the kids. I've got to do all the preparation to get that necessary for that person to look after all the kids. I've got to drive there. I'll probably worry about the kids while I'm there. This is just not helpful. And so if we shift our awareness to our biology and what our brain, our nervous system, and our body needs for real rest and breathing space, which we know, if this active, deep rest, it's called in one study, is actually so beneficial for us on a cellular level, and it, is amazing for our longevity. That looks like resting when you're tired. It looks like making sure you're getting sun on your face first thing in the morning, just to reinforce your circadian rhythm for night. It's being really intentional with settling yourself to sleep, which we are militant with our children. And we just kind of expect to like sit on a screen and then close our eyes and go to sleep. We need that settling too. Yeah, we need the nourishing food. We really need to recognize when our system is flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone, and lean into oxytocin, the love hormone, the cuddle chemical instead. And that may look like, sitting under a weighted blanket on the couch or sipping your favorite hot drink slowly or watching a really funny movie or your comfort TV, or sometimes just sitting in a chair and drinking a cup of tea and looking out the window and just having a bit of a mind wander. So all of these things are so actionable in the moment. They don't cost you anything. You don't have to go anywhere or organize anything. And that's why they are so perfect for mothers.
Yes, I love that. And it just takes the pressure off. We can look after ourselves without investing more and going to
Yeah.
more things and doing more things.
Mm.
Yeah, I just love that. So I'm personally, I know you said your kids are 8 to 18. Like I've got an 18 and a 16-year-old. So I'm at I guess I'm in a
Mm.
season of life where I've got more space and time for myself than I have in many, many, many years. And I want to be honest and say it's lovely in so many ways, but I have been feeling a little bit lost, a little bit unsettled, even a bit bored. I think there's discomfort in just having nothing to do, especially after so many years of giving and caring
Mm.
and, nurturing. And then all of a sudden, your kids don't really want much to do with you at
Mm.
all at the stage of life that my kids are at, or it's always on their terms. They're ready to
Mm.
chat at, 10 p.m. when I'm
I was going to say 10 o'clock at night.
ready
Yeah.
to go to bed.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess what would you say to that? Like, and mums like me that might be in that sort of stage of, I guess, sort of, finding yourself again and having this extra space that you're really not used to having and can be quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And from a hormonal perspective, estrogen is the hormone of sacrifice and accommodation. So it's highest when we're having our babies and needing to sacrifice and accommodate so many people. And it starts dwindling in perimenopause, which is when women really start to turn their attention back round to themselves.
Mhm.
And boredom is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good foundation for creativity and curiosity. And it sounds to me like you do have time to write that book. But also, this is kind of like perhaps the space in your life where you're going to pivot and you're going to start something new and exciting. So don't think, and that is uncomfortable when we
Mm.
are in that kind of liminal space,
Yes.
between things. Um, but start writing, handwriting lists and like doing mind maps and really, if you've got that energy and space, start to consider where you want to go with it.
Mm. Yes, I love that. Really good tips. Yeah, it is. It's like this sort of real transition period because I'm in
Mm.
the thick of perimenopause. I've got the teenage kids, and obviously that's also left like my husband and I have all this space and time
Mm.
again. It's like, oh, okay, the kids are busy. What are we going to do? Like, what do we
Yeah.
want this the sort of next stage of our life to look like? So it can
Yeah.
be, yeah, really exciting, but. Yes, maybe starting to write that book is a good idea. I love that. Something else you talked about before, like that sun on your face, that, first thing in the morning, the circadian rhythm. We talk a lot about that with kids and how beneficial that is for kids, particularly kids that don't sleep very well. And we're always talking about time outside as well. There's so many benefits of getting kids outside more for their physical, mental, emotional well-being. And we talk about that a lot, in terms of gut microbiome health and immune development and, sensory, like regulating sensory and nervous system. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, that importance of free time and outdoor time for children and teenagers as well.
Yeah, so there's a study that really links a lack of free time and time outside with declining mental health.
Mm.
So it's so important. And I think, we are living such busy lives, but we live very scheduled lives, and it's kind of ingrained in our culture, which is very much an optimization culture, that starts really young when we're booking our kids into numerous activities, through the week and then after school. And our kids' lives are very scheduled, and there's not a lot of breathing space. So sometimes I really advocate for looking at your diary. And if your diary is too full for the week, take something out. Schedule your rest, schedule your time outside like you would a doctor's appointment or a social obligation. And I think for some personalities, that's one really tangible way to make that change. There's also a beautiful study about mothers' mental health, especially in early postpartum. And I think when we're sitting in the home, like so many of us do in those first few years of parenthood, it's really easy to get overwhelmed and stressed by everything that's not done. And there is always so much that's not done in the home when our kids are little and even when they're older. But actually stepping outside and removing yourself, like actively removing yourself from the stress of the home, is so beneficial for your mental health. You're outside, you're more likely to have incidental conversations with the person you walk past on the street or the person at the bus stop or the barista at the cafe. That's really good for your mental health, and it kind of fuels oxytocin, that lovely hormone that heals and relaxes you. It's also incredibly beneficial for baby sleep and children's sleep to be outside. And I just use the rule that if our brain was designed and our nervous system was designed for life 10,000 years ago, we should be doing something every day that we would have been doing 10,000 years ago. And that's a really nice kind of reframe. So if you are pottering around your garden with with bare feet, that's something that people would have been doing 10,000 years ago. Or if you're having a conversation and sharing a meal, with someone that you trust, that's something that would have been happening 10,000 years ago. And 10,000 years ago, we did rise with the sun. Yeah. And we got us the sun on our face first thing in the morning. And then as soon as the light started to dim, we kind of, went into rest. Yeah. And so all of those things, it's so helpful for us. And we're mostly living sedentary screen-based lives. And I know a nutritionist friend of mine was telling me the other day that because of the amount of screens that kids are on in the daytime, it's actually sending them into puberty earlier. I read a study the other day that for kids born after 2010 who have really grown up with a lot of screens, they're going to be the first generation to cognitively underperform their parents. They don't have the ability to analyze, debate, critique, create, which is so alarming as a parent. But also, we are so protective of our children and their screen time, and we're not quite as protective of ourselves and our screen time. And I think so much of parenthood is about showing our children how to be human, showing them that when we're tired, we rest. And when we're frazzled, we, shake our limbs and move our body to release some of that tension. And when we're overwhelmed, we say it out loud and we drink a glass of water slowly and we go outside to take a few deep breaths. And all those things are so helpful, and children are really picking up on that. And I know, you've got teenagers as well. You get to that stage of parenthood and you're like, can they make a good meal? Do they know the comfort of a warm cup of tea or hot cup of tea in the afternoon? Do they know how beneficial sleep is and how much worse they'll feel on every level if they don't get the sleep their body needs? All of those things, that's kind of what parenting is. And we have all these things that we think we have to do in all those years, and then they get older and it's like, we're just teaching them how to be human. And that's actually becoming increasingly hard in an AI-assisted world.
Yes, I love that. We're just teaching them to be human, and it just all happens, so quickly. I mean, my eldest is now, he works full time. He's up at 4:30 every morning. Most of the time when he's home, he's sleeping because
Mm.
he's, been working or out with friends or but I can also see the like, I'll be making a cup of tea in the evening. That's like a little tradition we've always had. And he'll be like, Mum, can you make me a cup of tea? That,
Mm.
so you really like setting those foundations early. And although, I'll be honest and say my kids spend too much time on their phones. Like I feel like it's a full-time job to try and
Well,
keep them
I actually
off.
think it's very, and with my 18-year-old especially, that's not my responsibility anymore. You kind of do have to let that go and trust that you've taught them well, that they know the limitations, they know to pick up on that feeling. And we all know that feeling of scrolling for too long.
Yeah.
And, it's so important for them to know about the ludic loop, which is that, it's basically the perpetual cycle we enter as soon as we start scrolling. And it's a perpetual cycle of anticipation, uncertainty, and just enough positive feedback to keep us going. But basically, our nervous system is just in fight or flight when we're scrolling because it feels threatened. And I know for me, it was that piece of information that really shifted my time on my phone. And so whenever I do kind of get off a, 10 or 20-minute session of scrolling now, I just sit with how I feel. And it's never good.
Yeah.
It's never a positive thing.
No.
And there was one quote that I put in the book that if we spend 3 hours a day on our phone, that equates to 10 years of our adult life.
Wow.
Which is ghastly, isn't it?
That is just crazy, isn't it? What a waste. And I totally agree. And that's, I guess, what I meant by all of us, like it goes so fast and all of a sudden your kids are, like we're talking about 18 and it really, you can't be on at them all the time. Like all of a sudden it's like, it's their responsibility and we're just there to remind them and to be that, that I guess positive influence as well. Yeah, so that is, yeah, all really helpful. And I think most of us parents, feel like it is a constant battle or, a really big part of our lives is to keep our kids off or try and limit screen time. We're really we're really pushing an uphill battle with this, aren't we? Do you have any tips about, for families to build in that relaxed, unstructured downtime without screens and activities and schedules?
Well, I actually really encourage my kids to journal a lot because it's so good for their mental health. And when you are handwriting on paper, it really slows down your brain. So we do that. We do instruments before kind of entertainment, but they're using a screen as well to learn their instrument. So I'm very aware of that. Sometimes,
At least it's creative, like
at least it's creative.
yeah.
And a lot of the time, I live in Tasmania, so in winter it is harder, but because we have such distinct seasons here, when the weather is good, it's like you are just go outside. We're lucky to live in a cul-de-sac, so there's not a lot of traffic. But, I remember Maggie Dent saying that, when your child asks to do something, so my third child, who is almost 11, is just asked to ride his bike to school and into town. And I just remember, as much as I just think of all the bad things that can happen, I'm like, I would rather him be on his bike with his friends riding about than inside on a screen. And, he is more, he was my hardest birth and he's always kind of tugged at my heart a bit differently because of that. And is always been quite tentative. And so him coming to me with that, can I do this? And I just like, yeah, of course you can do it. Because as hard as it is for me, and it's one of those, stages where you're like, oh, this is another stage of letting go. It's so good for them to be doing that. And I don't think, we all love to watch a movie or a TV show together on a screen. It's not bad, but I think it's that really, it's the phone that is really tricky. It's really hard, and it's such a nuanced conversation. And I speak from a really ableist perspective because if we consider our phone an efficiency tool, and for people with any kind of disability, that can really enhance their daily life. And so I think it really is. I don't think the screens are bad. Messaging is helpful at all. But I think we can all learn. Firstly, we can understand how phones were designed to addict us. And then we can all learn what our biology thrives on, which is really positive things like time outside, rest, good food. exercise, sleep, all of those things, and then use our phones as efficiency tools.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I run an online business. Like
Yes, exactly.
my phone enables me to be able to do that. There's so many, positives that come out of technology,
Hmm.
but it's just, yeah, it's just managing it all, isn't it?
Yeah.
And trying to manage it for our kids as well. And I
And it's
love that
another
story.
thing to manage. We've
Yeah,
got
another.
so much to manage, and now we're also managing screens and social media. And it's designed to be very hard to do that. Like, my partner is so efficient at technology, like, he understands it in a way I never will. And even he has found it hard to put those kind of monitors in place for our
Mm.
children. Um, so yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's confronting, but I think it's also helpful to remember that our nervous system was not designed to be online, constantly accessible, and to know the whole world. Like, we were supposed to know our small village of people and only be
Yeah.
concerned with those people. And now we
Yes.
can spend 5 minutes on our phone, get 10 updates from around the world that are usually incredibly confronting and abrasive.
Mm.
And it's no wonder our nervous systems are not coping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And we often don't even recognize that that's impacted how we're
Mm.
feeling, do we? We just
Exactly.
get on with the next thing because the next thing has to be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love this conversation and the fact that it's not, prescriptive either, and it's very realistic. And I think it's just a reminder to us all to, leave our phone at home when we're going for a walk. And yeah, even like just for us as parents to put
Mm.
that phone aside a little more is going to, have a positive impact on, our entire family. Um, and so, if you were to leave our listeners with one thing to remember from this conversation, or maybe something we haven't even discussed, what would it be? I know that's a big question.
I think it's that breathing space is accessible to you right now. And you have 5 minutes in your day. And so my question is, what are you going to do with your 5 minutes today? And I'll give you 5 things to choose from. And I just want you to choose one. So you could lie with your legs up the wall and breathe deeply with your eyes closed for 5 minutes. You could drink a glass of water slowly and just stare out the window and look up at the sky, because when your perspective takes on a panoramic view, your nervous system knows that it's safe. You could choose to sing or sigh or hum for a few minutes, because that activates the vagus nerve, which takes you from fight or flight to rest and digest. And it's something that your kids will respond really positively to as well. Number 4, you could choose to have what my friend Naomi, who is a postpartum doula, calls a reverse sleep in. So go to bed early, dim the lights, make a really nice cup of tea, read a good book, and, spend an hour like you would on a Sunday morning if there wasn't a lot of things to get up for. We all crave and like really want that sleep in, but sometimes we actually have to do it at the other end of the day. So I call it a
Reverse
reverse sleep
sleep
in.
in. I
Yeah,
love that.
which is lovely. And 5 is first thing in the morning, we're in a really dopamine sensitive state. So it means that we're more sensitive to stress. As soon as you pick up your phone, you're leaning into stress.
Mm.
So if you can delay picking up your phone for as long as possible after you wake in the morning, you're essentially delaying your stress. And
Mm.
instead of picking up your phone, turn your face to the sun, maybe just go outside for a few moments. If you're boiling the kettle for a cup, I know I talk about tea a lot. I'm English, so big tea drinker. But while you're boiling the kettle, kind of just have a bit of a think, maybe handwrite a list if you've got lots on your mind. All those things are really beneficial. But choose one for today.
I love that. That just makes it so manageable. And I have a very early flight tomorrow morning. Well, I live like over an hour away from the airport, so I've got to be up at 3:30. So I'm going to do the reverse sleep in
Yes, do
tonight.
it. Do it. Yeah. And also, it's just so, it's almost rewarding and satisfying to go, Yes, I got into bed early and I'm just totally going to relish in this cup of tea and this good book that I'm reading, which is hopefully my book.
Yes, and I want to finish on that. I would just highly recommend everyone go and grab a copy of A Brain That Breathes by Jodi Wilson. Tell us where we can pick your book up.
It is available in all bookstores. So that's your local independent. If you can support independent bookstores, please do so. It's Dimmicks, it's QVD, it's Amazon, Booktopia, Kmart, Big W, Target. Basically, wherever you get your books, online, in actual stores. You can also find me on Substack. I send a weekly newsletter every week, and I'm practicing simplicity there.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I will make sure the link to your Substack is in the podcast show notes. And I just feel so much more relaxed after our conversation. So thank you so much for joining me, Jodi.
Thank you so much, Jess. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.